Have you ever wondered why a man who seems so certain about you suddenly grows hesitant, his warmth turning into distance overnight? Most women believe that closeness and constant reassurance will secure his devotion, but the truth is far more paradoxical. It is often the woman who embodies mystery, self-possession, and archetypal depth who draws his commitment like a flame draws breath. What you think pushes him away, your independence, your silence, your refusal to be conquered, may in fact be what compels him closer. Carl Jung believed that every man carries within him an inner image of the feminine, the anima, and every woman holds within her an archetype that speaks to this secret, unseen world. When she signals from that depth, commitment ceases to be a choice, it becomes a calling he cannot ignore. In the realm of attraction, it is never the loudest gestures that bind the heart but the invisible signals, the currents of energy flowing beneath words. Imagine a woman who does not beg for affection, who does not entangle herself in anxious pursuit, but instead radiates a quiet authority. She carries the signal of the queen archetype, an energy that whispers, "I do not need to be chosen, I choose." This is not arrogance but sovereignty. A man feels it instantly, an unshakable presence that mirrors his own desire for structure, order, and a kingdom in which to invest his devotion. To such a woman, he does not feel like a captor of her love but a knight answering a higher duty. And you, if you embody even a trace of this archetypal dignity, can awaken in him a commitment not born of fear, but reverence. Consider also the magnetic power of the lover archetype. She does not demand attention, nor does she dilute her allure by scattering her energy everywhere. Instead, her presence is a slow-burning fire. She knows her body, her voice, her silence. This lover signal does not mean seduction in the shallow sense but embodiment of life's fullness. When a woman drinks deeply from her own well of passion, when she enjoys the taste of her own existence, a man feels intoxicated in her presence. It is not about what she gives him, but about what she awakens in him, his forgotten capacity for wonder, his longing to surrender his restless ambition to something tender yet fierce. Many women misunderstand this and think pleasing him is the key, but Jungian psychology reminds us, projection is the dance. He does not fall in love with her acts but with the part of his own soul he sees shining through her. Yet there is a third signal, more subtle and often overlooked, the alchemy of the sage archetype. She is not cold, nor detached, but she carries wisdom in her tone, a knowing in her gaze. She has wrestled with her own shadow and no longer fears silence. This woman can sit with a man's confusion without collapsing into panic, she can hold his storm without being swept away. In a world where many mistake intensity for intimacy, her presence is like a mirror to his higher self. He feels not just desired, but understood. And in being understood, he relaxes into trust, the soil from which commitment grows effortlessly. When these archetypal signals emerge, not as performance, but as authentic emanations of the woman's inner work, a man feels compelled in ways he cannot rationalize. His anima responds, his unconscious stirs, and suddenly the casual dalliance transforms into devotion. This is why so many men seem to choose commitment with one woman and not another. It is not about chance, nor even about compatibility. It is about resonance with the archetypal forces that move beneath the surface of attraction. And you, if you dare to explore these depths within yourself, will no longer wonder why some men hesitate. You will see that hesitation vanish like fog before the morning sun, replaced by the clarity of his vow. There is a moment, subtle yet unmistakable, when a man begins to sense that he is not merely looking at a woman but standing before a force. He may not name it, but he feels it in his body, the tightening of his chest, the slowing of his words, the strange urge to protect and to serve. This is the echo of the archetypal signal at work. For in Jungian psychology, attraction is not only a matter of chemistry or choice, it is a dialogue between two unconscious worlds, meeting through symbols and energy. The woman who knows how to embody these signals does not need to convince or chase. Her presence alone initiates the alchemy of devotion. The queen signal, once awakened, does not manifest in loud demands or rigid control. It shows itself in the woman's posture, her refusal to diminish her desires, her calm certainty when others expect her to bend. Men who encounter this energy find themselves unsettled, for it awakens the hero within them. He realizes he cannot play small, cannot linger in boyhood while standing in her gaze. If you have ever noticed how a man suddenly begins to rise in ambition, to clarify his vision, after meeting a certain woman, you have witnessed this power. She did not instruct him to grow, her sovereignty simply left no space for his stagnation. He steps toward her not because she entices but because he feels summoned to his own destiny. But sovereignty without warmth risks becoming a throne of ice. That is why the lover's signal flows in to balance the queen. Where the queen commands respect, the lover awakens devotion through tenderness. She is not frantic in her gestures, not desperate to prove her desirability. Instead, she lingers in her own joy, whether savoring the way light touches her skin, or the way music stirs her body into motion. A man senses that she is in love not only with him but with life itself. And this realization pierces him. If he were to commit, he would not merely gain her companionship, but entry into a world where passion is alive. Men do not confess it openly, but beneath the armor of masculinity lies a hunger for that world, a thirst for wonder they cannot find on their own. The lover gives them this mirror, and so they tether themselves to her flame. The sage signal deepens this bond by introducing an energy rare in modern love, serenity. She does not flinch at the shadows he reveals, nor does she mask her own. Instead, she carries a wisdom that has been carved from pain and polished by patience. When she listens, she does not rush to fix. When she speaks, her words fall with the weight of truth, not manipulation. A man who encounters this finds himself disarmed. In her presence, he feels both naked and safe. His restless mind softens, and he begins to imagine what life would be if such understanding accompanied him through years. Commitment, then, ceases to be a cage. It becomes a sanctuary. These signals do not arise from strategy, but from inner alignment. A woman cannot counterfeit sovereignty, passion, or wisdom for long, for the unconscious always reveals the truth beneath the mask. Instead, she must embody them by tending to her own inner life. This is where shadow work becomes essential. The queen emerges when she reclaims the parts of herself once silenced by fear. The lover awakens when she allows herself to feel pleasure without shame. The sage appears when she confronts her wounds, not as scars to be hidden but as lessons etched into her soul. Only then do these signals radiate outward, invisible yet undeniable. The paradox is clear: the more a woman ceases to perform for love and begins to embody her authentic archetype, the more love seeks her without effort. Commitment is not chased, it is invoked. It is not demanded, it is offered. And the men who once seemed elusive begin to move toward her, not because she asked them to, but because their unconscious could not resist the pull. There is a deeper truth to these signals, one that few dare to grasp: they are not meant merely to capture his devotion, but to liberate hers. For the archetypal woman who embodies queen, lover, and sage does not operate from scarcity. She does not use them as tools to ensnare, but as natural extensions of her wholeness. And it is this wholeness, this radiant refusal to fracture herself for approval, that makes her irresistible. A man senses, often without understanding why, that she is already complete. His commitment to her is not a rescue, not a favor, but a recognition. He is drawn not to fill her emptiness but to stand beside her fullness. The queen within her carries the authority of boundaries. She does not fear solitude, for solitude is her court. She does not collapse when he withdraws, for her identity is not contingent on his presence. This signal is magnetic because it answers one of his deepest unconscious fears, the terror of being consumed. When a man meets a woman who can hold her own throne, he feels paradoxically freer to stay. He does not fear being swallowed by her need, because he sees that she belongs first to herself. If you have ever noticed how some women seem effortlessly cherished, how men orbit them even when they are not demanding attention, it is because this archetype whispers through them. Yet the lover softens what the queen establishes. Without the lover, sovereignty becomes isolation. With her, it becomes allure. The lover archetype thrives in the present moment. She is not haunted by tomorrow's uncertainties or yesterday's betrayals, she is immersed in the now. And this immersion spills over, transforming ordinary gestures into enchantment. The way she brushes her hair away, the way her laughter lingers, the way she savors a sip of wine, these are not accidents but unconscious signals of embodiment. A man, weary from a world that constantly demands performance, feels reawakened in her presence. He tastes the forgotten nectar of wonder, and he hungers to anchor himself to it. He does not merely want her, he wants to remain in the world she creates. Then the sage steps forth, quiet yet undeniable. She is the alchemist who holds space for paradox, who understands that intimacy is not about erasing flaws but about weaving them into strength. This signal disarms the masculine ego because it does not challenge with aggression nor soothe with pretense. It mirrors truth with compassion. A man may enter her presence armored with pride, but he leaves softened, for he has been seen without judgment. The sage archetype is powerful because it touches the anima within him, the unconscious feminine image that longs for acceptance. And once this part of him feels safe, the man commits not out of pressure, but out of reverence. But make no mistake, these signals are not performances one can put on like clothing. They are the result of inner individuation, the Jungian process of integrating shadow and light, of reconciling the ego with the deeper self. A woman who has not met her own darkness cannot embody the queen without tyranny, cannot awaken the lover without desperation, cannot channel the sage without hollow advice. It is only by descending into her own depths, by facing abandonment wounds, shame, the hunger for validation, that she emerges with true power. This is the paradox every woman must face. The very wounds she once believed made her unworthy are the crucible through which her archetypal radiance is born. What once repelled men in her insecurity becomes the source of the signals that make them commit. The shift is not cosmetic but alchemical. And when she begins to live from this alchemy, she no longer worries whether he will choose her. For the choice becomes inevitable, as natural as gravity pulling the earth toward the sun. When a man encounters these signals fully embodied, something ancient stirs within him. He may speak of attraction, of chemistry, of compatibility, but beneath those words lies a primal recognition. His unconscious registers what his conscious mind struggles to articulate, he has found a mirror to his own depths. For Jung reminds us that every man carries the anima, the inner feminine, just as every woman carries the animus, the inner masculine. These archetypes whisper to each other across the invisible field of relationship. And when a woman radiates queen, lover, and sage, she speaks directly to the anima within him, awakening his unspoken longing to be whole. Commitment, then, is not merely about her, it is about his journey toward himself, catalyzed by her presence. Notice how this differs from the common narrative of modern romance. Many believe that men fear commitment because they are careless or immature. But often, what they fear is not responsibility itself, but the wrong kind of entanglement, one that drains, suffocates or demands without giving meaning. When he encounters a woman who embodies the queen, he feels her capacity to reign beside him rather than over him. When he meets the lover, he feels alive instead of depleted. When he beholds the sage, he feels safe in his own imperfection. Together, these signals dismantle his fear. What was once seen as the trap of commitment transforms into a calling he cannot resist. The queen's authority, when authentic, carries a paradoxical softness. She does not cling, but neither does she reject intimacy. She allows closeness without surrendering sovereignty. A man feels both challenged and comforted by this duality. It calls forth his higher masculine, asking him to rise without shaming him when he stumbles. And you, when you embody this archetype, will notice men around you standing taller, speaking with more clarity, even changing their patterns of behavior, not because you demanded it, but because your energy made their old patterns impossible. The lover's allure lies in her ability to embody eros, not simply sexual energy, but the principle of life itself. She savors, she feels, she delights. Her joy is not a mask for emptiness, but an authentic communion with her own senses. This signal awakens in a man the part of himself that longs to feel again. So many men walk numbed by duty, ambition, or silent despair. When they meet a woman who glows with eros, they feel a kind of homecoming. The commitment they offer is less about securing her and more about securing that doorway back into vitality. He commits because she reminds him of what he could lose if he drifts away. The sage archetype, by contrast, is quieter, subtler, yet no less compelling. Her wisdom does not shout, it settles. She offers not the drama of constant emotional turbulence but the steady rhythm of trust. A man may crave novelty elsewhere, but novelty exhausts him. What he truly longs for, though he may not say it, is the peace of being truly known. The sage gives him this by holding his contradictions with grace. And so, without manipulation, she creates a gravitational pull. His unconscious recognizes that in her presence he will not only be loved but understood. That is the rarest of bonds, and men bind themselves tightly to it when they find it. These archetypal signals are not external tricks, they are internal harmonies. They emerge when a woman integrates her shadows, her fear of abandonment, her shame about desire, her wounds of rejection. Only through such integration does she radiate the signals that strike so deeply into the masculine psyche. This is why some women find devotion flows to them naturally while others, despite effort, chase endlessly. It is not the effort that secures commitment, but the alignment. There is an almost mythic quality to the way these signals work, as if the ancient stories of gods and goddesses were never myths at all but maps of the human psyche. The queen echoes Hera, not in her jealousy but in her sacred sovereignty, ruling from her inner throne. The lover recalls Aphrodite, not in shallow seduction but in her embodiment of life's beauty, awakening vitality in those who draw near. The sage reflects Athena, not only in strategy but in wisdom tempered with compassion. When these archetypes breathe through a woman, she becomes more than herself, she becomes an archetypal figure in the eyes of the man who beholds her. His unconscious responds as though she has stepped out of legend, carrying the authority of something greater than personality. And in this aura, commitment is not coerced but consecrated. The queen archetype does not ask for devotion with words, her very being commands it. She is the signal of boundaries, subtle but immovable. When a man tests, she does not collapse into anxiety, nor does she rage into defense. She simply holds. That holding, that refusal to be bent by temporary storms, activates something ancient within him, the instinct to build, to protect, to align himself with her permanence. He feels that her presence is a kingdom worth serving, and even if he cannot articulate why, he orbits her like a planet around a sun. The lover, by contrast, draws him not with authority but with abandon. She knows how to lose herself in the present moment without losing herself as a person. Her dance between surrender and sovereignty is what ignites his devotion. He does not feel trapped, for she does not demand chains. He feels chosen, for she offers her radiance freely yet never recklessly. In her, he sees the possibility of passion without chaos, intimacy without annihilation. And that paradox becomes irresistible, for most men have only known one without the other. She signals through touch, through laughter, through the way she delights in life itself. To him, that delight feels like an oasis in the desert of daily striving. He commits not just to her, but to the life she embodies. The sage completes this triad by offering what neither sovereignty nor passion can provide alone, meaning. A man may be enthralled by beauty and inspired by authority, but he binds himself to wisdom. The sage does not cling to illusions, she has looked into her own shadow and returned with truth. When she listens, he feels understood, when she speaks, he feels guided. It is not maternal, nor is it cold, it is archetypal. In her, he feels the presence of a companion who will not only share pleasure but also endure trial, who will not flee from darkness but will light the lantern within it. To such a woman, a man does not merely commit with his body, he commits with his soul. What is striking is that these signals cannot be imitated without inner transformation. A woman who has not done her shadow work cannot hold the queen's dignity, she will confuse control with sovereignty. Without integrating her desire, the lover collapses into seduction as performance rather than embodiment. Without facing her pain, the sage becomes brittle, offering advice rather than wisdom. Jung's great lesson resounds, individuation is the key. Only by reconciling her hidden wounds does a woman become whole enough to radiate these archetypes. And here lies the paradox that shifts everything, the signals that make him commit tonight are not crafted for him at all. They are born from her own union with herself. They flow from the depths of a woman who has stopped chasing validation and started embodying truth. And it is precisely this indifference to pursuit that magnetizes commitment. The less she seeks it, the more it seeks her. Commitment, in its deepest sense, is never about chains or contracts. It is about resonance, the meeting of archetypes that activate something sacred in both souls. A man does not fall to his knees because a woman demands loyalty, he falls because he feels he has encountered the embodiment of his own hidden longings. Jung spoke of the anima as a man's secret feminine compass, an inner guide often projected outward onto women. When a woman lives her archetypes authentically, she becomes the vessel through which his anima comes alive. It is not her alone he commits to, but the part of himself she awakens. And yet this truth contains a paradox, she is never merely a mirror. She is a sovereign being, and it is precisely because she does not exist to complete him that he feels compelled to remain. The queen's presence is perhaps the first threshold. Her boundaries shape the field of the relationship. She does not collapse when he withdraws, nor does she surrender to the chaos of his moods. She simply holds her throne, her dignity intact. This quiet firmness communicates, I will not lose myself to keep you. That signal pierces his unconscious, for it dismantles the cycle of conquest. He cannot conquer her, because she already belongs to herself. And strangely, this non-possessibility awakens his devotion. For men often tire of what they can easily own. It is the treasure that cannot be seized, but must be honored, that binds them to fidelity. The lover then enters, not as a contradiction but as complement. Without her, sovereignty might grow austere, with her, it blossoms. She embodies eros, the principle of life force that animates all things. When she moves with delight, when she breathes into her own desires without shame, he feels vitality coursing back into his veins. She signals to him that intimacy is not a trap but a rebirth. Her laughter becomes a sanctuary, her touch a reminder of what it means to be human. The lover archetype whispers to his anima, "You are alive." And for that reminder, men give their loyalty with ease, because in her presence, they remember themselves. Yet sovereignty and passion alone cannot anchor devotion through the long winters of life. This is where the sage quietly extends her hand. She does not compete with the queen's authority nor the lover's fire, she offers depth, the grounding force of meaning. A man may feel inspired by power and intoxicated by passion, but what sustains him through decades is wisdom. When she listens without judgment, he feels safe to confess his fears. When she speaks from her scars, he feels guided rather than corrected. The sage archetype is the signal of permanence, the whisper that says, "Here, you may rest." And it is in that rest that his heart makes its vow. These signals are not strategies to be mimicked but revelations of a woman's inner work. Each archetype is born when she dares to face her own shadow. The queen arises when she heals the fear of abandonment. The lover awakens when she dissolves the shame around desire. The sage is born when she integrates the lessons of pain. Without this inner alchemy, attempts to imitate these signals ring hollow, leaving men intrigued for a moment but gone by dawn. With it, her presence becomes unforgettable. And here lies the secret. The very moment she no longer needs him to commit is the moment he longs to. When her energy is whole, when she radiates these archetypes not as tactics but as truth, she ceases to chase, and he ceases to run. For he has found not a performance, but a woman who embodies the very forces his unconscious has sought all his life. To truly grasp the power of these signals, one must see them not as isolated traits but as a trinity, three archetypal flames that, when burning together, illuminate the path of lasting devotion. The queen provides structure, the lover infuses passion, the sage offers wisdom. Together they form a constellation that captivates the masculine psyche, answering his deepest fears and fulfilling his hidden longings. When a woman lives within this constellation, her energy carries a rare harmony, she is untouchable yet inviting, fiery yet calm, mysterious yet clear. This paradox is precisely what compels him to step closer rather than drift away. The queen's sovereignty is not about ruling over him but ruling within herself. In her presence, a man realizes that her love cannot be earned through manipulation, nor lost through his temporary failures. She is stable, unshaken, and this stability disarms him. For the boy within him fears being swallowed by neediness, while the man within him longs for a partner who holds her ground. When he sees she does not crumble at his withdrawal nor beg at his silence, he feels both freedom and awe. That signal, so often misunderstood, is the soil in which trust takes root. Yet sovereignty alone cannot ignite the heart. It must be warmed by the lover's flame. She brings playfulness, sensuality, a zest for life that transforms ordinary moments into sacred experiences. She does not perform pleasure to keep his gaze, she inhabits it because it is her essence. This authenticity stirs his anima, pulling him into realms he has forgotten. When she smiles, it feels like sunlight after exile. When she touches, it feels like permission to breathe. He commits because he does not want to lose the gateway she opens, a world where vitality and tenderness flow without shame. But passion and sovereignty, powerful as they are, remain incomplete without wisdom. This is where the sage archetype reveals her quiet strength. She listens not to respond but to understand, and in her silence a man feels seen beyond his armor. Her counsel is not lecture but presence, born from her own confrontation with suffering. The sage does not offer comfort that numbs or advice that controls, she offers truth wrapped in compassion. And in that truth he feels safe, perhaps for the first time. Safe enough to rest his restless ambition, safe enough to lay down his weapons. This signal binds him not with intensity, but with depth. The woman who integrates these three does not chase commitment, she emanates it. Her very existence becomes the invitation. And here lies the paradox that Jung would have understood well: when she ceases to seek validation, validation pursues her. When she no longer clings, love clings to her. When she detaches from the fear of being left, she becomes the one no man wishes to leave. It is essential to remember that these signals are not tactics to be wielded for quick results. They are not masks to wear for a night. They are the fruit of individuation, the slow and sometimes painful journey of integrating shadow and light. The queen arises when she forgives herself for needing too little or too much. The lover awakens when she welcomes her own body with reverence. The sage is born when she embraces pain not as a curse but as a teacher. Only through this inner work do the signals radiate authentically, creating an aura no man can resist. And so, commitment becomes not a prize she wins but a reflection of who she has become. She does not beg for loyalty, for her very being calls it forth. She does not fear abandonment, for she has learned that her wholeness cannot be abandoned. The man who stands before her senses this truth, and in that moment, his choice is already made. The deeper one looks into these archetypal signals, the clearer it becomes that they operate less like strategies and more like frequencies. A man, in his rational mind, may weigh pros and cons of commitment, but beneath reason lies resonance. He feels pulled toward what awakens him, steadies him, and allows him to rest. And when a woman embodies the queen, lover, and sage, she broadcasts a triad of frequencies that his unconscious cannot ignore. This is why words alone cannot secure devotion, why promises and pleas often fail. Commitment responds not to demand, but to energy. The queen's frequency is one of sovereignty. She does not fear loss because she does not fear solitude. This self-possession signals to him that her worth is not negotiable. He realizes he cannot bargain it down, cannot win her by half-effort, cannot charm her with hollow gestures. In her presence, his casual patterns collapse. He either rises or departs, and most often he rises. For the masculine, when confronted by true sovereignty, instinctively longs to meet it with strength. The queen calls forth the man from the boy, and the boy within him feels both terrified and liberated by that summons. The lover's frequency is eros itself, a radiant aliveness that transforms the ordinary into the sacred. Unlike performance-based seduction, which drains, her presence nourishes. She delights in her senses without shame, the way wind touches her skin, the rhythm of music, the taste of sweetness. This delight spills outward, and he feels caught in its tide. The lover's signal tells him, life is worth savoring, and you are invited. A man who has long lived under the tyranny of duty, numb to his own vitality, finds this unbearable to resist. He commits not just to her, but to the possibility of remaining close to that flame. The sage's frequency is truth. It does not entertain illusions, but neither does it wound with cruelty. She has sat with her own darkness long enough to no longer project it onto others. When he enters her presence, he feels safe in his imperfection, for she does not flinch at contradiction. The sage archetype communicates, I have seen shadow, and I am not afraid. This steadiness dismantles his unconscious fear of judgment. He commits because he senses that with her, he can walk through life's trials without carrying the weight alone. She becomes not a rescuer but a companion of depth, and this rare bond anchors him more powerfully than desire alone ever could. Together, these archetypes form the gravitational pull of commitment. Sovereignty without passion feels cold. Passion without wisdom feels unstable. Wisdom without sovereignty feels detached. But when united, they create balance, harmony, and magnetism. Men may chase novelty elsewhere, but novelty fades. What endures is the resonance of these signals, because they do not merely seduce, they transform. They do not lure him into a cage, they awaken him to his higher self. And once he glimpses that self in her presence, he cannot easily let it go. The paradox every woman must face is that these signals cannot be faked. They are born not of performance but of individuation. The queen awakens when she stops abandoning herself. The lover arises when she stops shaming her own desire. The sage emerges when she accepts that pain, too, can be a source of wisdom. Only when she tends to these inner tasks does she radiate their outer signals. Without this, her attempts at allure remain surface level. With it, she becomes unforgettable. Thus, commitment flows not from effort but from essence. The man who once wavered now steadies. The man who once feared entrapment now hungers for closeness. And she, no longer grasping for love, sees it arrive like water to a flame, inevitable, undeniable, and self-sustaining. There comes a turning point in this unfolding, the moment when archetypal signals no longer function as threads tugging at his desire, but as revelations of her own liberation. For while it may appear that she embodies queen, lover, and sage to summon his devotion, the deeper truth is that these archetypes rise for her. They are the guardians of her wholeness. The commitment he offers is a side effect, not the goal. And it is this paradox, that she does not need his vow, that makes his vow inevitable. The queen within her is not born from pride, but from healed abandonment. She has walked through loneliness and discovered that her throne is not empty when she sits upon it alone. This inner sovereignty is the frequency of non-need. Men feel it like gravity, they cannot explain why they lean toward her, only that they do. In a world where many grasp and cling, her detachment is intoxicating. He senses that she is with him by choice, not by necessity. That awareness transforms commitment from obligation into privilege. The lover within her is not shallow performance but deep vitality. She does not offer eros as a tool to secure affection, she lives it because it is her birthright. She no longer shames her body, silences her pleasure, or hides her longing. And in doing so, she becomes radiant. Men feel alive near her not because she gives them energy, but because she reminds them of their own. He commits not to keep her, but to keep himself awake. For in her flame he sees his own forgotten fire, and he fears losing that more than losing her. The sage within her is not cold detachment, but scarred wisdom. She has been betrayed, she has grieved, she has known disillusionment. But instead of allowing these wounds to harden her into cynicism, she has transmuted them into clarity. She listens without projection, speaks without hidden agenda. Her calm steadiness makes him feel he can unclench his fists at last. A man commits to such a woman not because she fixes him, but because she allows him to exist as he is, imperfect, vulnerable, and still worthy of love. Together, these signals create the alchemy of devotion. And yet, they cannot be performed. They can only be embodied through shadow work, through facing the unconscious that most avoid. Jung called this individuation, the process of becoming whole. And it is this process that transforms a woman from seeker into magnet. When she integrates her own darkness, she no longer projects it onto him. When she welcomes her own light, she no longer hides it for fear of envy. When she embraces her own truth, she no longer twists herself for acceptance. And so, she becomes irresistible, not because she tries, but because she is. The man who once feared commitment suddenly finds himself anchored. The man who once fled intimacy suddenly seeks it. He feels devotion rise in him not as a decision, but as inevitability. He does not know that it is her archetypal signals that summon him, he only knows he cannot imagine his life without her. Yet she, having done the work, does not mistake his vow for her worth. She knows she was whole before he arrived, and she will remain whole if he departs. This is the final paradox: the less she clings to love, the more tightly it clings to her. And here, at the end of the spiral, everything clarifies into one truth: the woman who lives her archetypes is not waiting to be chosen, she is already free. Commitment, devotion, loyalty, these come, but they no longer define her. She has become the queen of her own realm, the lover of her own life, the sage of her own soul. And from this wholeness radiates the final signal, the one that transcends all others: peace. The woman who knows her worth doesn't chase, she chooses.